Mom married Bully's dad and forced me to live 11 miserable years of him thinking she got another son in the process. Now she'll be left with no one 'cause I went NC and he hates her. Hey Reddit. Growing up, my home life was nothing like the happy blended family my mom liked to pretend we had. Her new husband's kid made every day miserable, and somehow I was always told to be the bigger person. Years went by, things got worse instead of better, and eventually I walked away from all of them. Now my mom's trying to reach me again, but I'm not sure she'll like my answer. So, when I, 26 male, was 10, almost 11, my mom, 45 female, sat me down at the kitchen table with this big fake smile on her face. The kind she uses when she's trying to sell me something I'm not gonna want. She told me she'd been seeing someone for a while and things were getting serious. His name was Mark, 48 male, and he had a son named Carl, 23 male, who was 7. I'd met Mark once before, nice enough guy, shook my hand, called me champ, like every adult who doesn't actually know kids thinks is cool. I didn't hate him. But then she hit me with the big part. We were gonna move in with him. She was acting like it was this dream scenario. It's gonna be great, you'll have a brother, she said. He's younger than you, so you can be a good role model. I just sat there thinking, I didn't ask for a brother. And I definitely didn't ask to live in some other kid's house. But I didn't say that. I just asked if I had to. She frowned and said, families stick together. This is a good thing for all of us. The first time I met Carl was memorable, I guess. Mom brought me over to Mark's place for dinner. Carl stood in the doorway like I'd just pulled up to steal his bike. No smile, no hi, nothing, just a glare. Mark nudged him like, go on, say something. Carl mumbled, hi, like he was spitting out a bug. Dinner was awkward. Every time I tried to talk, Carl would cut in or make some noise to throw me off. I asked him what grade he was in, and he said, why do you care? His dad gave him a quick, Carl in that warning tone, but the kid didn't even flinch. After dinner, Mom and Mark went into the kitchen to talk, which basically meant gush about how well things were going. Carl and I were left in the living room. He looked me dead in the eye and said, this is my house. My room is bigger. Don't touch my stuff. I just shrugged. But inside I knew this was gonna suck. When we officially moved in a few months later, I found out my new room was the smallest in the house, and Carl's was decked out with all the stuff a 7-year-old could want. Posters, toys, his own TV. Mine looked like the spare guest room someone half-heartedly tried to make kid-friendly with an old blanket and a lamp that barely worked. First week there, Carl made a point of reminding me every day that I was the extra. He'd walk by my room and say, you don't belong here, then run off before an adult could hear him. At first, Mark seemed like he was on my side. If Carl got caught being a jerk, he'd tell him to knock it off. But then I started overhearing stuff. Like once, after I told Carl to quit shoving me in the hallway, Mark pulled him aside and said, don't let him push you around. Stand your ground. It wasn't loud, but I heard it. And the look Carl gave me after told me he'd just been handed a free pass. One afternoon, about a month in, Carl accidentally spilled juice all over my math homework. I grabbed his wrist before he could run off laughing, and he started yelling like I'd broken his arm. Mom came rushing in, saw him fake crying, and immediately turned on me. What is wrong with you? She snapped. He's younger than you. Be the bigger person. I tried to explain what happened, but she cut me off with, you're just like your father. Don't ruin this for me. That one hit different. She never talked about my dad unless she was mad, and apparently now she was using him as some kind of warning label for me. Carl stood behind her, smirking. I knew in that moment there was no way I was going to win here. Every time I tried to defend myself, it'd just make me the problem. After that, I stopped telling Mom when Carl did stuff. I knew she'd either excuse it or twist it into my fault. And Mark? He was a mixed bag. Some days he'd tell Carl to back off. Other days he'd just say, you two need to get along, like it was a mutual thing. Spoiler, it wasn't. The rest of that school year felt like walking on glass. Carl made sure I knew he didn't want me around, and Mom made sure I knew she wasn't going to rock the boat for me. I remember lying in bed one night, hearing her laughing downstairs with Mark, thinking, guess I'm just the accessory in this happy little family package. Carl was only 7, and if he was already pulling this crap, I could only imagine what the next few years were going to look like. Turns out, I didn't need to imagine. He showed me. The first real sabotage spree started about 2 months after I moved in. It was a Tuesday night. I had a science project due the next morning, one of those poster board ones where you have to make a neat display with diagrams and everything. I left it on my desk while I went downstairs for dinner. When I came back, there was a giant streak of chocolate pudding across it. Not even like it was dropped. It was smeared. Carl was sitting on his bed across the hall, licking a spoon like some cartoon villain. I didn't even bother asking him if he did it. Of course he did. I tried to fix it, but the whole middle section was ruined. The next day, I had to hand it in like that, and my teacher gave me this disappointed look like I'd just been lazy. That was only the start. He'd accidentally delete my files off the family computer whenever I left them open. We shared the same login, so it was easy for him to go in and mess stuff up. He even changed the names of my homework files to random garbage, so I couldn't find them until it was too late. And it wasn't just my schoolwork. He started going after my stuff, bending my trading cards, snapping the tips off my pencils, throwing my books across the room so the pages bent. I had a small collection of model cars I'd been building with my grandpa. He took one and smashed it on the kitchen floor when no one was around, then kicked the pieces under the fridge. When I told Mom, she just sighed like I was overreacting. You can rebuild it. It's not the end of the world. You need to learn how to get along with him. I learned fast that get along in her mind meant don't make him mad. It wasn't just at home either. Carl made sure to ruin school for me too. That first year, he started this rumor that I cheated on a math test. I didn't even share a class with him. But somehow it spread. People started whispering when I walked into the lunchroom. Even some teachers treated me differently, until the principal finally told everyone to shut it down. The physical stuff got worse too. He'd slam doors right when I was walking through so they'd catch my hands or feet. One time he swung the bathroom door so hard it hit my shoulder, and I had a bruise for a week. He'd throw things at me, little stuff like erasers or toy cars, just to see if I'd react. If I ignored him, he'd escalate until I couldn't. And the thing with Mark, he'd scold Carl just enough to feel like he did something, but he never actually stopped him. I overheard him more than once telling Carl, "Don't let him boss you around," which translated meant, keep doing what you're doing, just don't get caught. As I started staying at the library after school, just so I could get homework done without worrying about him messing it up. Some nights I'd bring everything to my friend Jake's house and do it there. Mom thought I was just making friends and was happy about it. I didn't bother explaining the real reason. It only got more ridiculous from there. One time I left my backpack in the hallway while I went to get a drink, came back, and it was gone. I found it outside, open, with my stuff scattered on the grass. Carl was across the street, riding his bike in circles, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Mom's response? You shouldn't leave your things unattended. It became this constant cycle. He'd do something. I'd either deal with it or tell her, and she'd side with him or tell me to let it go. I stopped expecting anything different, but the worst part was knowing this wasn't just going to be a phase. He wasn't growing out of it, he was growing into it. And every time an adult brushed it off, it was like they handed him another tool to use against me. By the end of that first year living together, I'd already built a mental map of where I could hide my stuff, when it was safe to use the computer, and which spots in the house gave me a good view of the hallway, so I'd know if he was coming. I was only 11, but I felt like I was planning my life around avoiding a landmine. And Carl? He was just getting started. By the time Christmas rolled around that first year, I'd already lowered my expectations to the basement. I figured the holiday would just be awkward at worst. Maybe a few snide comments from Carl, maybe him trying to accidentally knock over my hot chocolate or something. I wasn't ready for how far he'd go. Mom and Mark had planned this big family holiday at our house. Both sides were invited. The house was stuffed with people. On Christmas morning, we did the usual gift thing. I actually got a couple of nice ones. A new set of drawing pencils from my grandparents, a small model kit from my uncle, and a hoodie I'd wanted for months. For about an hour, I thought maybe Carl would just leave me alone for once. Then I went to the bathroom. When I came back, my presents were gone from the couch where I'd left them. At first, I thought maybe Mom moved them. Then I saw it. The smashed model kit box in the trash, my hoodie stuffed into the fireplace grate, and my pencil set scattered across the kitchen floor with half the tips broken. Carl was standing there with two of his cousins, trying not to laugh. I just stared at him, and he gave me this little shrug like, "What are you going to do about it?" I lost it. I walked over and started picking up the pencils, and I told him he was pathetic. That's all I said. Pathetic. But of course, he immediately started yelling that I was attacking him. Mark came in, asked what was going on, and before I could explain, Carl's crocodile tears kicked in. Mom swooped in like she was rescuing a baby bird. "What did you do to him?" she demanded, like it was already decided I was guilty. "He destroyed my stuff," I said, holding up the pencil set like proof. She just crossed her arms. "You need to let these little things go. This is Christmas. I don't want any drama." I told her it wasn't little to me. That's when she hit me with it. Not the exact same as before, but close enough to make my stomach drop. You're starting to sound just like your father used to. Don't mess this up for me. Right there. In front of everyone, she told me that again. My face went hot, not even from embarrassment, but from how blatant she was about it. She wasn't even trying to hide that her priority was keeping this picture-perfect family image. And Mark? He didn't say a word. Just rubbed the back of his neck and looked away like if he didn't see it, it wasn't his problem. The rest of the day was worse. At Mark's parents' house later, Carl made sure to whisper stuff to his cousins about me. By the time lunch was served, I noticed I was the only kid sitting alone at the end of the table. The ones who normally talked to me were giving me these awkward side eyes, and when I asked one of them why, she just muttered, "Carl said you're mean." I caught Carl watching from across the table, grinning like he'd just pulled off the prank of the century. It wasn't just the kids either. One of Mark's sisters made a comment while passing me the bread. "You know, you could try being a bit friendlier. Carl says you keep to yourself a lot." Like I was the weird one for not enjoying being treated like garbage. By the time we got home, I was done talking to anyone. I went straight to my room and closed the door, only to come back later and find some of my old sketchbooks gone from the shelf. They weren't in the trash this time. I found them in a box by the garage door. "Why are my sketchbooks in here?" I asked Mom. "Oh, I'm making some space in your room," she said, barely looking up from her phone. "You don't use them anymore." "I use them all the time," I said, flipping one open to show the half-finished drawings. "Well, Carl needs somewhere to keep his Lego sets. You've got too much clutter anyway." That wasn't clutter. That was stuff I'd had since before we moved in. Stuff from before Carl was even in the picture. It hit me right then. She wasn't just letting him do whatever he wanted. She was actively helping. I started keeping my most important things in a backpack I took everywhere. Clothes, sketchbooks, anything I didn't want her organized or accidentally destroyed. The rest I knew was fair game for him. The audacity of it all wasn't even shocking anymore. It was just exhausting. If I spoke up, I was causing drama. If I stayed quiet, they took it as permission to keep going. And if I ever tried to defend myself, somehow I was the villain in the story. That Christmas was the turning point for me. It wasn't that I suddenly hated them. I'd been heading there for a while, but it was the first time I realized there was no winning. Mom wasn't going to back me up. Mark would only step in if it made him look like a good dad. And Carl? He'd just keep pushing because nobody was stopping him. They'd already made it clear. This wasn't my family. The problem was I was still stuck living with them. High school didn't magically make things better. If anything, it made Carl more creative with the crap he pulled. He was about 15 now, tall enough to actually match me in size, and quick to use that as some kind of intimidation card. I didn't scare easy, but it was a different kind of exhausting when you couldn't even walk down the hallway without wondering if someone was about to shoulder check you for fun. The accident happened during one of Mark's so-called family game nights. Carl had been smirking since we sat down, which meant he was cooking something. We were playing one of those games with a little spinner. When it was my turn to reach for it, Carl accidentally shoved the table. The board slid, my hand jerked forward, and my finger slammed straight into the corner of the table leg. I heard the crack before I felt it. Sharp, blinding pain shot up my arm. I dropped the spinner and grabbed my hand. "Watch where you're putting your hands," Carl said, deadpan, like I'd just been clumsy. Mark frowned but didn't raise his voice. "Mom?" She rolled her eyes. "It was an accident. Don't start with the drama." "I think it's broken," I said, holding it up. "Then we'll get it checked tomorrow," she replied, like I'd just told her the milk was out of date. "You'll live." The next day at the clinic, the doctor confirmed it. Hairline fracture. I wore a splint for weeks. Not once did Carl apologize. In fact, I caught him telling one of his friends at school that I punched a table like an idiot. The job sabotage came a few months later. I'd applied for a part-time job at a local bookstore. Perfect for me, quiet, steady, close to school. I was one interview away from getting it. That morning, I left my folder with my application and resume on the kitchen counter while I grabbed breakfast. When I came back, it was gone. Carl was in the living room, scrolling on his phone. I asked if he'd seen it. He shrugged. "Maybe you left it in your room." I tore my room apart. Nothing. Ended up having to print a backup copy at the library, which made me late. The interview was awkward, rushed, and I could tell the manager wasn't impressed. A week later, I found my original folder in the garage, stuffed under a box of Christmas decorations. That wasn't just petty. That was calculated. I told Mom, expecting at least a flicker of concern. She didn't even blink. "If you want a job, you'll figure it out. Stop blaming Carl for everything that goes wrong in your life." It was the same script every time. I was too sensitive. I held grudges. I needed to be the bigger person. She never once asked Carl if he'd done it. Didn't matter if it was obvious. By then, I'd stopped seeing Carl as some annoying stepbrother and started seeing him as a long-term problem. And the only way to solve that problem was to get out. I kept my head down for the rest of that year, focused on grades, and stacked whatever cash I could from small side gigs. I mowed lawns, walked dogs, did random computer fixes for neighbors, anything to build up an escape fund. Every dollar went into a little metal lockbox I hid in the lining of my backpack. I didn't trust my desk drawers. Carl didn't stop, though. If anything, my quietness just made him bolder. He'd corner me in the hallway and mutter insults under his breath. He'd unplug my laptop charger when I wasn't looking so my battery would die mid-assignment. Once, he accidentally left the freezer open, ruining a bunch of groceries. And somehow, Mom found a way to blame me, because I'd been the one to make a smoothie earlier. That was the moment I decided there was no point proving myself right in this house. They didn't want the truth. They wanted me quiet and cooperative. By the time senior year started, I had a clear plan. Graduate, get into college, move out, and never look back. I didn't care if it meant living in a shoebox apartment. Anything was better than staying here. I started keeping my schedule tight. School, library, home, repeat. The less time I spent around Carl, the fewer chances he had to pull something. The day I got my college acceptance letter, I didn't tell anyone in the house. I kept it to myself for 2 weeks, just savoring the fact that I had an exit ticket. The moment I had housing confirmed, I started packing the stuff I cared about and storing it at Jake's place. By the time summer rolled around, I was basically living out of a duffel bag. It wasn't escape yet, but it was close. So, by the end of summer, I was gone. College dorms weren't exactly luxury living, but they were mine. No Carl, no walking into my room wondering if something was broken or missing. I didn't go back for holidays, didn't show up for birthdays, and I ignored every family dinner invite. For years, I stuck to that plan. Life was quiet, and I kept it that way. Then, years later, Carl found me. It started with a message request on Facebook. Hey, long time. Need to talk. I stared at it for a while before hitting delete. 2 days later, he showed up outside my building. I don't know how he even got the address. He leaned against the hood of a beat-up sedan, looking way older than 22 should. Same smirk, though. Been a while, he said when I walked up. I didn't bother returning the small talk. What do you want? Just catching up. Catching. Also, I need a place to crash for a bit. Got laid off, my apartment situation's complicated. No, I said, not even thinking about it. His eyebrows went up. That's it? No? That's it. Number. I walked past him and into the building. He didn't give up. For the next week, I got texts from random numbers, some just checking in, others trying guilt. We're family, man. Mom would want you to help. It's just temporary. I blocked them all. Then it went quiet. I figured he'd given up. 2 months later, I got a call from an unknown number. A police officer asked if I was available to come down to the station to answer a few questions about an open theft investigation. I thought it had to be a mistake. I'd never even had a parking ticket. At the station, they showed me a report. Someone had used my name and info to open a store credit account and run up charges buying electronics. The store had video footage, blurry, but the guy was about Carl's height, build, and most importantly, driving that same beat-up sedan I'd seen outside my building. The officer asked if I knew him. Yeah, I said. My stepbrother. They already had their suspicions. My driver's license number had been used, but the address on the account was fake. He must have gotten that number years ago when we still lived under the same roof, maybe rifling through my stuff like he always did. They'd traced the car from the footage to a tow yard, where it had been impounded 2 weeks earlier, under Carl's name. Even with that, it still took me hours to clear my side. I had to pull old emails, proof of where I'd been, bank statements, everything. Eventually, they told me I was in the clear, but they'd be in touch if they needed more. I left the station with this knot in my chest, not because I was scared anymore, but because I knew exactly what had happened. Carl had come to me looking for a free ride, I'd shut him down, and now he was trying to drag me into his mess. That night, I called Mom. She answered on the second ring. You couldn't help him, could you? She said before I even spoke. He tried to frame me for theft, I said flatly. The cops have him on camera. They impounded his car. Carl would absolutely. He's been doing the same thing since I was a kid, only now it's criminal. You're exaggerating, she said. Even if he made a mistake, you should be the bigger person. He's family. I'm done being the bigger person, I told her. I'm done, period. You can't just cut people out forever. Watch me. I hung up. A few days later, my uncle called. Your mom says you're making a big deal out of nothing, he said. She's upset. Maybe try talking to Carl. Not happening, I said. Tell her she can talk to him when he's out on bail. Carl didn't try contacting me again after that. But the damage was done, not just because of what he'd tried, but because Mom's first instinct was to defend him. She didn't ask if I was okay, didn't even care that my name was tied to a criminal investigation. All she cared about was that I'd refused to help her golden boy. I decided then that this was the last time I'd ever have to deal with either of them. A week later, I changed my number, set up mail forwarding to a P.O. box, and made sure my workplace had strict no information policies in case anyone called phishing for details. I even told building security to turn away anyone not on my list. I didn't make some big announcement about cutting them off. I just stopped existing to them. No calls, no visits, no, let's just talk. I knew if I gave them even a crack in the door, they'd shove it open and drag me right back into their chaos. The last thing I heard about Carl came from a coworker who knew someone in the same tow yard that had impounded his car. Apparently, he'd been caught shoplifting from a hardware store and spent a couple weeks in county jail before getting probation. I didn't smile when I heard it, but I didn't feel bad either. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about making sure the door stayed shut, permanently. It had been months since I'd last heard from either of them, and I intended to keep it that way. But one Saturday, my grandparents called asking if I could help move some boxes in their garage. No drama, no hidden agenda. At least, that's what I thought. I pulled up around noon, grabbed a dolly from the corner, and started stacking old storage bins. About 20 minutes in, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A white SUV rolled up the driveway. My stomach tightened when I saw Mom step out. Carl climbed out of the passenger side, sunglasses on, hands in his pockets like he was arriving at some VIP event. "Look who's here," Mom said, like she'd just spotted an old friend. "Didn't know this was a family reunion," I said, keeping my eyes on the dolly. "Oh, don't be dramatic. We just happened to be in the neighborhood." "Yeah, sure," I muttered, sliding another bin onto the stack. Carl wandered over, leaning against the garage door. "Still holding grudges, huh?" I didn't answer. "Guess some people can't grow up," he added, smirking. I kept moving boxes until he spoke again, louder this time. "You know, about that whole crime thing. Total misunderstanding. You really overreacted, man." That made me stop. I set the box down, turned to face him. "Misunderstanding? You used my name and my ID number to steal from a store." Carl shrugged. "Allegedly." Grandma came out from the kitchen, drying her hands. "What's going on out here?" "Nothing," Mom said quickly. "Just catching up." "Not nothing," I said, raising my voice so she couldn't smooth it over. "Your son tried to pin a theft on me, and you defended him. Just like you've defended him every time he's done something." Mom's face tightened. "This isn't the place." "No, this is exactly the place," I pointed at Carl. "Christmas gifts? Smashed? Science projects? Ruined? Fake rumors at school? That was him. My job application for the bookstore? He hid it in the garage so I'd miss the interview. The accidental broken finger during game night? Yeah, not so accidental. And then, when all else failed, he tried to make me look like a criminal." Carl laughed under his breath. "Man, you keep a list?" "I keep proof," I said, pulling a small folder from my backpack. I'd brought it for something else, but it worked perfectly now. I opened it and held up the printed screenshots from the police report, the impound record with his name, the still frame from the store camera showing his car. "Recognize this? That's your car. That's your name. And this is the only reason I'm not sitting in a holding cell right now." Grandpa stepped closer to look. Grandma's eyes narrowed at Carl. "Is this true?" she asked. Carl's smirk faltered for half a second before he recovered. "That's not the whole story. It's the only story that matters," I said. Mom stepped forward, grabbing my arm. "You're trying to embarrass me in front of my parents?" "No, I'm making sure everyone knows what you've been covering up for over a decade," I shot back. "You're acting just like your father," she snapped. "Always looking for a fight, always playing the victim. And you're acting just like you always have, putting your image above your own kid." The silence after that was sharp. Grandpa looked between us, but no one moved. Carl finally broke it with a low chuckle. "Man, you really haven't changed." "Neither have you," I said. "Which is why this is it. I'm done. I don't want calls, I don't want visits, and if I see either of you at the store, I'll turn the other way. You're blocked. Permanently." Mom's face went red. "You can't just cut us out." "Watch me." I grabbed my keys from the workbench and walked past them. Grandma called after me, but I kept going. I could feel Mom's glare on my back, and Carl's smirk was burned into the side of my vision. But I didn't turn around. As I got into my car, I heard Mom's voice crack into that high-pitched tone she used when she was losing control. "You're ruining this family!" From the driver's seat, I called back, "It was already ruined. I'm just not living in it anymore." Then I shut the door and pulled out of the driveway. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a text from my uncle. "Heard you had a showdown at Grandma's. On the ride home, Carl blew up at your mom. Guess getting called out in front of our grandparents bruised his ego. And maybe he realized she couldn't shield him anymore. Said he's done with her too." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. 2 days after the showdown at my grandparents' house, I got a call from Grandma. "I told your grandfather everything," she said. "He wants to have a family dinner. Just you and your mom. No Carl." "I'm already done with her," I said. "This is different," Grandma replied. "Your grandfather insists. Says it's important." I didn't like it, but I respected Grandpa enough to show up. He wasn't the type to drag me into drama unless there was a reason. The dinner was at their place, just the three of us. The second I walked in, I could feel the tension. Mom sat at the table acting like she'd just been caught speeding, trying to look calm but clearly nervous. Grandpa was at the head of the table, leaning on his cane, eyes sharp. "Before we eat," he said, "I want to ask you something directly. Everything your grandmother told me, about the smashed belongings, the broken finger, the job sabotage, the framing, is it true?" Mom forced a laugh. "Dad, you can't believe all of that. He's always been dramatic. Answer the question," Grandpa cut in. His voice was low, but it had that weight that made people sit up straighter. She glanced at me, then back at him. "Some of it's exaggerated. He's always misunderstood Carl's—" "Stop." Grandpa didn't raise his voice, but the air in the room shifted. "I've been a father a long time, and I know the difference between a kid causing trouble and a mother enabling abuse. You didn't protect him. You told him to be the bigger person while letting that boy tear him down for over a decade. And now, as adults, Carl tries to commit a crime in his name, and you defend him? Unacceptable." Mom's jaw tightened. "It's more complicated than—" "No," Grandpa said, leaning forward. "It's simple. You failed as a mother." She sat back, lips pressed into a thin line. "I've made my decision," Grandpa continued. "I'm removing you from my will. Your share will go to him." He gestured toward me. "You've shown you can't be trusted to put family first, but he has. Even after everything, he's worked hard, stayed out of trouble, and built a life without your help. That's the kind of person I want carrying on what we've built." The room went dead quiet. Mom's face went pale. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," he said. "I won't reward selfishness and abuse." She turned to me like I was supposed to protest. I didn't. I just stared back at her. Grandpa pushed his chair back and stood. "Dinner's in the kitchen. Eat if you want, leave if you want. But as far as I'm concerned, this conversation is over." I didn't touch the food. I got up, thanked him for being honest, and walked out without saying a word to her. As far as I was concerned, she'd finally been forced to hear the truth, and I didn't have to be there for the fallout. That night, I cut her off for good. No more drawn-out arguments, no more second chances. She could over what Grandpa said, she could cry about the will, she could try to spin it any way she wanted. And she did try. Over the next few weeks, I started getting random calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Some were wrong numbers, but the pauses before the voice spoke told me she was sitting there, listening to me say hello, deciding whether to talk or hang up. Then came the messages through other people. My uncle, a couple cousins, even one of Mark's sisters. "She just wants to talk," they'd say. "She's sorry. She's not the same person anymore." But I knew exactly who she was. She'd been the same person since the day we moved into that house, and the only reason she was trying now was because her golden boy had cut her off too. I'd already heard from Grandma that Carl barely speaks to her these days. Their relationship fractured after that blow-up in the car. Without him, without me, without Mark's family backing her like they used to, she was left with nobody who'd play into her version of reality. Grandma told me she spends most of her time at home, not getting invited to things as much. Mark works long hours and mostly keeps his head down. He's never confronted me about any of it, but he hasn't exactly stood up for her either. Just stays neutral, like if he ignores it long enough, it'll vanish. Carl keeps his distance, and her own parents aren't taking her side anymore. The woman who once paraded her perfect blended family to anyone who'd listen was now sitting in a half-empty house, surrounded by the consequences she swore would never touch her. Every time someone tried to mediate, I shut it down the same way. "I'm done. She made her choice years ago. I didn't hate her. Hate takes too much energy. I just wasn't going to sit in a room with her so she could half apologize, shift the blame, and try to rewrite history. I wasn't going to let her into my future so she could drag old wounds into new places. She could call, she could beg, she could send letters. They'd all go unanswered. Grandpa's words at that dinner stuck with me. I won't reward selfishness and abuse. For the first time in my life, someone had said it out loud in front of her, without sugarcoating, without excuses. I didn't need to add anything to that. So I let the silence do the rest. Mom's alone now, and not because of some twist of fate or misunderstanding. She's alone because she built a life where everyone else's comfort came second to her own image. And when that image cracked, so did the people who used to stand beside her. I don't plan to see her again. Not at family gatherings, not in hospital rooms, not at funerals. Some doors stay shut because opening them would just let the same storm back in. And mine? It's locked. Permanently.